What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Awesemo.com MLB Live Before Lock Show, presented by Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports. CSV uploads, CSV edits, and legitimately attainable first-place prizes over there. Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports, sponsor of Live Before Lock. I'm Dave Loughran. With me, T. McBee, Terry McBride. Second time we've done a show together, getting these Live Before Lock shows going and having a good time doing it. 7 games tonight, Terry. What's happening, man?
Yeah, same old, man. Just trying to cram some stuff into my head for this slate, and then jumping right into the early bird after this one with VMAC, doing that one a little early tonight. And so if I start talking about guys who aren't on the slate, just slap me and get me back on track, because I got a lot in my head right.
Fair enough. I'll air slap you, virtually slap you, given that everything's done virtually these days. We've got 7 games. I suppose we could go a little bit game-by-game breakdown here and then revisit some of the other stuff, since we have plenty of time to make this happen. And we have lineups for most games so far. I think the only spot we don't have – actually, I think we got lineups confirmed for everybody, right?
Yeah. I think the last one just dropped was Colorado, I think.
Yep, beautiful 9:40 game. Let's dive into it then. Happy to have everyone with us, by the way. If you're just joining, jumping in the door right now, hit that thumbs up. It helps us immensely. Subscribe, hit the notification bell as well while you're at it. Cleveland, Minnesota. Aaron Savali and Kenta Maeda. Kenta Maeda, surprisingly, 115 pitches last time, Terry. Not something we're used to seeing from him, especially coming from a Dave Roberts managed Dodgers team. 8 one-run, 1-hit innings, 12 strikeouts, but 115 pitches. He had not thrown north of 85 pitches all season up until this point. So you look at this game, and the Minnesota Twins have a 4.5 run total, 4.1 for Cleveland, with Aaron Savali towing the rubber for them at 9,500 on DraftKings. How are we approaching these pitchers today, and breaking it down with ownership in mind as well?
Yeah, so I like Maeda. I'm a little bit concerned about the fallout from that pitch count. It's probably going to be fine, but that's something, a guy who's not stretched out to that point, throwing, I think, 30, 40 more pitches than he's been throwing so far in the season. So I don't think we would have seen that if he hadn't been chasing that no-hitter. He gives up 2 hits. He's out of there probably less than 100 pitches, around his current season average. So I'm a little bit concerned about that, but not really. He projects fairly well for me. He doesn't carry the biggest projection on DK from Alex. And at that price, there's a few guys that, may be a little bit better. So I'm not crazy sure about him over on DK. He looks like the 6th ranked starter over there going by Alex's projections as of my last update. It's a little bit of a big price tag. I like Lynn better. I think we could probably get a better game out of Jack Flaherty over there for that kind of money. Savali, not so much on the board for me. He's right in that same range projection-wise, but I don't trust the pitcher as much. And I think this Twins offense has a pretty good shot at getting to him. Just in general, Savali is 21.7% strikeout guy for his career, 5.3% walk rate. Keeps the ball in the yard really well, which is the one concern. The Twins' power might be a little bit limited. So I'm not sure if it's a spot where I get to Twins stacks, but their offense might still keep me off of Savali a little bit.
Yeah, neither of these guys are garnering a ton of ownership either. Right now in DraftKings, you've got Kenta Maeda at 6% and Savali weighing in at 1%. So you're really not getting much there. On FanDuel, on a single pitcher site, Maeda at 3%, Savali at 2%. So, I guess if you're trying to be different, I can understand that. I will say the one interesting thing when it relates to, or as it relates to Kenta Maeda, is the Indians are actually striking out at a higher clip against righties than I would have originally suspected. And they have an 81 WRC plus against right-handed pitching. Like it's only 734 plate appearances, but we work with what we've got. And if you take a look at this actual lineup, there are some strikeouts in there. It's a little ugly. The meat of the order is ugly, but Cesar Hernandez is striking out like 25% against righties this year. The bottom of the order's got some Ks. It could get him into trouble. There's no question about that. And it's also hard to rely on him to get that 100-plus pitches, even though he did it last time in an absolute gem. But it does look like a Cleveland team that is striking out more this year than they had in seasons past, particularly against right-handed arms.
Yeah, and that number definitely for Cesar Hernandez is surprising that he's up that high. He's not typically.
He doesn't have a single stolen base either.
Yeah. So some strange numbers from him up top. Still 363 on base clip as of my last. So that's keeping him in that leadoff spot up there. Gets on and sets the table nicely for those guys behind him. But yeah, you're right. We could see a nice start out of Maeda here. And at that low ownership on FanDuel, you can easily get 2-3x the field and still not be over 10% exposed to him. I don't mind that at all. I think, if we see a couple bonus strikeouts, see him approach that 100 pitch count, we could see a nice start here.
What about bats on either side? Like I have a lot of respect for Maeda. He's a pain in the ass from a DFS perspective. A lot of it being over the years because of a somewhat restricted pitch count, which kind of sucked. But he's a good pitcher, and even in games where he didn't give you what you needed when you rostered him, he wasn't going to give up a lot of runs. He wasn't going to give up a ton of home runs. And you kind of rattled off some of Savali's numbers. He's also been pretty solid himself outside of a few 3 home runs allowed on the year. All in all, the guy has pitched well. He's kept runners. I wouldn't say he's completely limited them off the base paths, but he hasn't walked a lot of guys. So both of these pitchers have looked really good to start the year.
Yeah, and it's definitely going to limit the bats, kind of like what I was saying with Savali. I don't know how much Twins I want to roll out against him, even if I'm not going to be putting him in my lineups too much. It's not a spot where I'm like, oh, yeah, load up the other side, because he does do such a good job keeping the ball in the yard. He's striking guys out at a little bit better clip. And to your point, 2.3% walks so far this year in 34 innings over 5 starts. So, that's a tremendous, tremendous number. If he's keeping guys off base like that, limiting opportunity, that's really good for him. So, yeah, definitely could limit the amount that we see the Twins. And kind of the same thing on the Indians side. Just looking at the top stacks tool, Cleveland is ranked 4th from the bottom on both sites. Not drawing a ton of ownership, but it's kind of in line with their probability of being the top stack. Minnesota, a little bit higher, kind of in the middle. But again, on DK, they're getting a little bit of ownership advantage, but FanDuel, the public's like right there with them. So, not too much appeal in these bats. They're fine, but they're not really good like they normally would look.
If you guys have any questions, we'll get to them later in the show. Still plenty of time to get through all of these games and knock out your questions as well. So, feel free to hold on to that stuff. Or if you want to ask chat, more than welcome to do that as well. But we'll get to them later on in the show. What is it? 6:09, almost 6:00, there's almost 6:10. We got about an hour until lock to go here. Yeah, I think some of the Minnesota ownership might just be because they're not egregiously expensive. Like Garver's on the IL, and it's going to knock down a few price points here where you've got a bunch of them in the mid 4K range. I guess they're a little bit easier to roster, but yeah, they have a higher top stack probability than their ownership. But all in all, Terry, neither of these teams really stand out as great options today.
Yeah, it's one of those spots where we might see the Twins score 4 or 5 runs, once they get to the back end of the game, the bullpen and everything, but might not hit any home runs, something like that. So it could just be a frustrating DFS type game, potentially a good baseball game, but not really a spot I want to hammer.
All right, so on today's strategy show, Jake Hari and I spoke to this next game a lot. Alec Mills, Casey Mize, he was a mixed bag in his debut, but I think you saw a lot of good too. Casey Mize gave up 7 hits, 3 runs. He didn't get out of the 5th inning, but all in all, his strikeout stuff looked stellar. He struck out 7 of the 20 batters he faced. So, if you're putting up strikeout numbers like that consistently, and I'm not saying he will, but if he can hover in that 28, if up to 30K strikeout range, we're going to be talking about a guy that we're rostering for many years to come as Detroit looks to rebuild their rotation. 15% swinging strikes in that start as well. What are we doing with somebody like Mize who is getting, virtually no ownership, right? And at 2.2%, the Chicago Cubs, this is the part that kind of stood out to me. It was a bit shocking. Not only are the Cubs right now in our top stack tool getting more or the second most aggregate ownership behind only Arizona with 13% top stack probability, 18.6% aggregate ownership. But Terry, they're actually striking out the second most against righties this season, almost 30% on the year for the Cubs against right-handed pitching. Definitely found that interesting.
That is interesting, and I hadn't realized that. That could be, a little tick in Mize's favor for sure. I think he's definitely in play with the low ownership on DK. I think you can get to him. It's a very low price. So, I mean, you're rolling him out there as an SP2, trying to pick off a decent score. He doesn't have to go nuts. He doesn't have to be the highest scoring pitcher of the night over there. So, yeah, I think you can get a good game out of him for, 6,200 on DK, 6,800 on FanDuel with essentially untouched, 0.2% ownership as of my last update. He's right in the middle. I mean, 6% probability of being the top pitcher in Alex's top pitchers tool. Kenta Maeda as the fourth ranked guy is only at 7.9. So we're not talking about a gigantic gulf between those two guys in terms of being potential to be the best pitcher. And the ownership advantage is very, very nice on mine. So I think we can justify some of it. I wouldn't go completely nuts with it. His specialty is a splitter that dives off the table in the like mid to low 80s, playing off of his like 96 mile an hour heater.
He got like 19 swinging strikes on that, or in his debut, which is an insane amount of whiffs on that pitch in his debut.
Yeah, it's a sick pitch, generates a ton of strikes for him. So he was in like the high 20s through the minors. Excellent track record with strikeouts in college and everything. So I expect him to be kind of like you said, an anchor for this rotation for the next few years, assuming health and everything. And a guy we're going to be plugging in, probably paying 9-10K for not too long, in the future. In this spot, second start, still a little question on how much leash he might get. You never know. The Cubs have a few bats that hit the splitter really, really well, including Kyle Schwarber, including Javi Baez. Generated a good amount of power on it. So it's interesting. With the strikeouts offsetting that, I'm not entirely sure. I'm getting similar looking projections to kind of, I think, what Alex's model was seeing for the Cubbies, though. I was getting them pretty high ranked, top 5 hitters in the order, getting pretty solid home run marks from me. So I like the stack. I'm going to probably have a little bit of both sides of it, and probably more on the Cubs side.
Yeah, it makes sense. They're a lot of ownership here, and despite how ridiculous Mize's pedigree is, it is still a spot where a Cubs team like this has a lot of power, a lot of potential. I'm not against it at all, but I do think I don't think we should ignore the and obviously you aren't, but I don't think we should ignore the upside for Mize either. There are strikeouts to be had here. He does have really good stuff. Like I've mentioned this before, but scouts have said that this guy could have 4 legit plus pitches, which is super, super rare among any pitcher coming into the league, especially this young. So he's cheap. I don't know how long he's going to be. I don't know if he's going to have a short leash, if he's going to get the hook early. But if he doesn't, there might be something there. It's very much a boom or bust spot for Casey Mize. And I think for Chicago as well. What about the other side of this one with Alec Mills? His price point's egregious on DraftKings, but Detroit's a bad. 7,800 on Mills is pretty wild. How are you approaching this matchup on both sides?
Yeah, so I don't love Mills. I'm not getting a good projection for him. My stuff's FanDuel based, but it's only like a mid-teens projection. So even at 7,500, not really in consideration for me over there. Even against a bad Tigers offense, I'm just not in love with the spot. Kid's throwing 32% sinkers, tries to generate the ground ball, keep the ball in the yard a little bit. He was a mid-20 strikeout guy in the minors, so around 20% strikeout is somewhat reasonable to expect. But so far this year, he's only been around 16.3% strikeout. Walks a few too many guys, sitting at 4.96 xFIP this year. I don't love the arsenal. He is limiting hard hit, limiting exit velo. His 98th percentile exit velo, 91st in hard hit. But just doesn't strike out a lot of guys. Not going to be a guy who's going to rack up fantasy points. And then if they hang a couple runs on him, you're basically shot in the foot. So not really a strong DFS option for me. But definitely not really something that's going to walk me into the Tigers bats by any means either.
So basically Cubs bats and a sprinkle of Casey Mize in this game.
Sounds about right to me. Yeah, I think. Is that basically how you would approach this one, or do you have any?
Yeah, no. Maybe I might be a little bit higher on Casey Mize. I think it's hard to. It's kind of difficult to project these young pitchers, right? Especially given that we don't know what his workload's going to look like. Like if he had no leash at all tonight, would you have? If there were no concerns about him being limited, would you have a potentially different opinion on him?
Probably, and I'd probably be getting. I'm trying to click over to my starters tab here. I'd probably be getting a little bit higher innings projection on him.
Right.
Yes, yeah. So I'm getting a fairly low innings projection that's generating a decent overall point projection for him. So yeah, if I was more confident in that, it would be a bigger ownership share for me here.
Yeah, I think I'm the same way. But he's got filthy stuff, and if if he can put it all together, his command was good in his debut, but he had some hittable stuff for sure. And he got tuned up a little bit, got into a jam in the fifth, couldn't get out of it. You're striking out 30+% of batters in your first ever start. We know that there is a strikeout upside here, and strikeouts are king in DFS. So it's worth considering.
We're also taking Chris Bryant out of this lineup, which is worth mentioning. He doesn't have to face Chris Bryant up top. He gets Ian Happ up top instead. Ian Happ is around a 30% strikeout guy, just leading off. Terrific bat, ton of power in there, but not Chris Bryant. So
right, no, that's a huge advantage for sure. It might also, let me see something here, make the it's going to make a Cub stack cheaper too, which is one of the reasons I think you're going to see quite a bit of ownership on them. And it's not just one batter skewing this aggregate ownership up. Like if you look at the highest owned hitters right now, you have Baez up there, Caratini, Schwarber, Happ, all of the Wilson Contreras. A lot of these guys are in the top like 15 on the entire slate. Earlier today, they were in the top 10, but there's definitely going to be a lot of them, and it's going to be spread out, not just one or two that are catching 40-50% ownership because they're mispriced.
Yeah, and we're seeing that even on the back end with Jason Hayward 10%, Nico Horner 10%. They're just super cheap over there. Right? They're all under 3K. Those last four hitters in the lineup, so it helps you get to some of the other bats if you can figure out a way to stack them all together and put it together. So it makes sense that it's all trending up. I like the looks as of my last update, 13% on Anthony Rizzo. He's expensive at 5,200, but that's a bat I can grab out of this lineup if he's not going to be super high owned. Use as a one-off maybe a little bit. And, if I was picking a one-off just out of this lineup, I think that would probably be it just based on ownership. Schwarber's too high. Baez too high.
Yeah, I think so. Jonathan Scope's getting a bunch of ownership. That's interesting at $4,000 on DraftKings on the opposite side of this game. Any Detroit bats interest you?
He would probably be the one I would have called out just based on his general power. He's got good pop in that bat, underrated power bat the last few years. I don't have his last few years in front of me with what he's racked up, but I think it was over 20 each of the last three, something like that as of the last time I wrote him up. So I do like his bat. Miguel Cabrera's old, but I mean, he works. If you want to build like a little small Detroit stack here, I would go like Scope, Cabrera, and then maybe a Candelario if you could. Well, they're both first basemen. That doesn't work on DK. I would do that maybe on FanDuel where you could use it at the double corner spot, but I don't love that. A Kristen Stewart from late in the lineup as an outfielder, very, very cheap. It's just not a team I get to a lot. When they're against a bad lefty, I do, but otherwise not too much.
Okay, let's move on to Oakland and Texas. Lance Lynn, Jesus Luzardo, these guys are bringing in a ton of ownership today. You can check it all out at our top stack tool with our ownership tool, all of that. See what stacks are going to be the highest owned, see what stacks are the best value. And my favorite part of this is you'll hear us talk about the top stack probability, meaning what is the percentage chance that this team is the best stack on the slate, but then you can weigh that against their aggregate ownership. You can weigh it against their value. So there might be an instance where it's a huge slate, it's real spread out, and there's a lot of good bats, and say the Houston Astros have the highest top stack probability at 12%, but their aggregate ownership might be 24%, and their value is towards the bottom. So it would actually make them overall less appealing than it looks, in a vacuum when you're just talking about what is the chance that they could be the top stack. So you can use this for MME, but you can also use it for single entry and 3-max when you're hand building teams. It's really universally used to build good baseball lineups. And you can pair it with our ownership as well and our projections and the Fantasy Cruncher add-on. You go to awesemo.com/join, check all of that out. And if you scroll to the bottom of that page, you can see videos, kind of tutorials on all of our best, most popular tools, all of which created by Alex Baker himself, used by Alex Baker to win all these tournaments that he does. He's a number one ranked DFS player in the world for a reason. We don't just slap his name on this. These are legitimately his that he makes and he uses every day. So you know what you're getting when you sign up for Awesemo.com. We have weekly, express weekly, monthly, annually. I would recommend the all access monthly, get access to every sport. And if you're just a basketball fan, you got about 6 hours to use the promo code MAMBA, MAMBA, to get 1 week of all access NBA content for just $8.24. You know, 8.24 Mamba Day. Got 6 hours, about 5 hours and 39 minutes to be exact, to punch that in. But the all access has everything you want, including everything for baseball that we just talked about and we'll continue to talk about. Go to awesemo.com/join and be sure to join the premium Slack chat when you do. People talking DFS all day long. So Lance Lynn and Luzardo, Terry, they're getting ownership. 42% Luzardo on DraftKings, 55.7% Lynn on a 7-gamer. 37% Lynn on FanDuel as well. So he is mighty popular today against the Texas Rangers team that is coming in with a implied run total of 3.5. I believe it's actually the lowest on the slate.
I didn't see that it was the lowest. It's a kind of a garbage lineup they're rolling out.
I'm sorry. Rangers against Luzardo have the lowest at 3.5. Oakland's at 4.1 against Lance Lynn. I got that mixed up. My fault.
Gotcha.
And I think the Royals are tied with a 3.5 run total against Jack Flaherty.
Makes sense. And still, I mean, just not where we're used to seeing even this, kind of mediocre Texas offense. But you take a Joey Gallo out of that lineup. Shin-Soo Choo is not going to be up top. So a couple of their better bats are not going to be in this one. I really like the spot for Luzardo. That ownership is really, really tough to swallow. But I think he puts up a dynamite start against this lineup. I mean, the kid is a very, very high-end kid. He's been up for a little bit. We've seen 27 innings this year. He's at 23.9% strikeout, walking a few too many, a little bit under 10%, only 3.79 xFIP. But he's just a really, really strong-end kid. 91st percentile in fastball velo, so he brings a 96-mile-an-hour fastball sinker. It's a 44% whiff on his curveball, 53 on his changeup. Just crushing it right now. He's 28 to 30% strikeout rate throughout his minor league career. Kind of shot up through the minor league system in 2 years. Mid-twos, fifth throughout the minors. Just a great curveball. So, kid I really like. I just don't know how we're going to eat that much ownership on him. On DK, yeah, you're getting him as a high-owned SP1, and then you can try and offset that at SP2. On FanDuel, he's at like 25% ownership to a 9% chance of being the top guy. That's something I might end up, for a pitcher I really like, I could probably be pretty comfy coming in on him around 15%, just shave some of that off and put it on another pitcher who's going to be lower owned. As much as I like him, I think I might have to do that with him here. Yeah,
it's a ton. DraftKings specifically, I guess FanDuel single pitcher site too, but DraftKings specifically, Terry, almost 60% ownership on a day where we have 14 pitchers is pretty intense.
Yeah, it's a lot. And there's other good high-end pitchers to choose from, and that are not necessarily tracking anywhere near those top three guys, right? We've got Bauer, Lynn, and Luzardo all pulling extreme ownership. And then most of the other guys are pretty reasonable. So you grab a Maeda, somebody like that we talked about. You grab a Merrill Kelly that we'll get to, a Brad Keller that we'll get to for super cheap. And maybe put together a couple less expensive guys, or like a second-tier guy and a cheap guy, and just load up on some bats over on DK. It might be the approach. We've seen some of these high-end starters get lit before. So, yeah, that could be the way to go. But there are three very, very good, very expensive, very high-end, high-owned starters there. So
yeah, it's crazy. Lance Lynn is really showing a lot with that fastball. He made some considerable improvements, and it's completely altered the way I look at this guy. He's always been good at home, and he's always been really good against righties. But there's just, you look last year, he had a 16% whiff rate on his fastball. Just crazy numbers. This year, it's still at 14%. The usage is up considerably from the previous couple of seasons. He's got good stuff, man, but that's really high ownership on a slate where I actually think there's a lot of good pitchers. So, anything else you want to throw in on Luzardo against the Rangers?
I think Luzardo we hit pretty well. I think, Lynn, I agree with you. I like him. I'm getting a mid-range projection on him. A lot of right-handers in this lineup. There really only has to worry about Matt Olson on the power side of things from the A's perspective. So I can see him cruising through this lineup. But again, we're swallowing a ton of ownership to get to him on both sites. 36.9% ownership on FanDuel at only an 11% chance of being your top starter. I like paying up. It's a lot of extra money, but I kind of like paying up to get to Bauer there. It's a much better ownership number
Yeah, Bauer, his price tag is just too cheap. It's too cheap. I think you should be paying way more for Bauer than you are. Sorry, on DraftKings. I know you said you're talking FanDuel, but on DraftKings at 10-2 with how he's pitched, how he's performed, it's pretty wild. Anything else from either side for hitters in Oakland, Texas, or do you want to move on to this game with Trevor Bauer and Brett Anderson?
I was originally thinking we might be able to get away with a little bit of Texas sneakiness, but without Gallo in there, I just don't see it. So I'm getting off of that. Yeah, and I don't really see the ace here. So yeah, I don't see bats very much.
Cincinnati, Milwaukee, Trevor Bauer. We just alluded to it. 10,200 on DraftKings to me is egregiously underpriced. I know that sounds crazy because he's in that 10K range, but look at him on FanDuel. I know the pricing isn't apples to apples, but he's $12,000 there. And just to put that in perspective, right? Jack Flaherty, Terry, is $10,000. There's a $2,000 difference between Bauer and Flaherty. On DraftKings, there's a $900 difference. On DraftKings, there's a $700 difference between Bauer and Savali. That's crazy, right? You go to FanDuel where Bauer's $12,000, Aaron Savali's $9,300. It's a $2,700 difference. So that price point on Trevor Bauer, who has been remarkably good recently, and the only real runs he's given up are solo shots, and those are the only hits of the game. So sure, I don't care. Give up 3 solo shots if you want. If you're going to go 7 innings with 3 hits, all of them solo shots, and strike out 11, I have no issue with that at all. Now, granted, I would prefer he allowed none, but these are the best type. These are the best type of pitchers, right? Garrett Cole, Justin Verlander. They'll give up some pop. They'll give up the rogue home run, maybe 2. Those will be the only runs. They'll limit base runners. Their pitch count stays low as a result. They don't get in jams, and they go 9 or 7 innings. They strike out double digits, and they take everybody off the base paths. It's a beautiful thing that Bauer's been doing.
Absolutely. And you mentioned Cole, and it's the exact same kind of thing. You keep the guys off the base paths. It's amazing how little those home runs that pop up every now and then actually damages. So total agreement. The price is too low on DK, even at 10-2. And I think even with that, pretty heavy ownership, it kind of makes sense to maybe load up and get over that and just not sweat it with him. Expect the good start from him. Expect the really quality start. And just pound him into your SP1 and then maybe mix up a lot of your SP2s and just create some variance that way. Love him on FanDuel. Like I just said before, I'm willing to pay up that price for him here. Top of the board on the top stacks tool, only drawing like 16, 17% ownership. So totally in play. Last 3 years, he was 26.2% strikeout rate, 30.8, and then 27.8. Just dominant strikeout rate, 45% whiff on his cutter and his slider. I read it off on the early bird last night. According to MLB.com's blurb, he's the 4th pitcher since 1900 to record at least 40 strikeouts with less than 10 hits allowed over a 4-start span.
Wow.
Which is bananas. I mean, you think about those numbers over 4
Fantastic. Yeah. And that's the thing. Again, like he's not allowing any – he's walked a few in a couple games, but he's allowing like nobody to get on base. His whip is .57.
That's just crazy.
Right? It's nuts. And, give up the solo shot. I don't care. You want to give me 12 strikeouts with it, I will oblige. So he's my favorite pitcher on DraftKings today. Especially, I'm pretty shocked, to be honest with you, Terry, that Trevor Bauer isn't by far the highest owned pitcher there. He's second. He's second. But he's still 10% behind Lance Lynn. And one of the reasons for this is Christian Yelich is striking out at a 31% clip this year. It's the highest ever since his rookie season, 31%. If you look at this entire Milwaukee team, though, they're against if you look at them against righties, they're striking out a lot. There's a bunch of strikeouts in this lineup. They miss guys like Yasmani Grandal. They miss guys. Somebody tweeted me about this today. I totally agree. Like they miss the Mike Moustakas, the Yasmani Grandals. There's real protection that they provide in that lineup, and they simply don't have it. So I don't think we need to be as worried about this Brewers lineup as we would have been before. Smoke will strike out. Narvaez will strike out. He has been. Sogard doesn't. Arcia doesn't. They're at the bottom of the lineup. Avisal Garcia striking out 25%. Yelich 30+. Like there are some strikeouts in this lineup.
Absolutely. There's not much to worry about here. They're a team we get to every now and then, but not against a pitcher like this. I mean, that's just you just read off all the reasons why, and even the guys who don't strike out on the back end. A lot of that strikeout percentage is based off of facing much worse pitchers than Trevor Bauer. I'm not worried about his ability to sit down Eric Sogard 2 or 3 times also here. So we could see one of those just monster strikeout games from Bauer today. So
I'm with you.
Yeah, I'm surprised. Honestly, just looking at that ownership, like you said on DK, he should be trending upwards like 55,
right?
60%, right? We've seen those numbers before in ownership.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what it is.
But Lance, but that's the thing. Like Lance Lynn's up there, and it's not as if Lance Lynn is wildly underpriced. I think Lance Lynn is too cheap. Don't get me wrong, but I think Bauer's too cheap as well.
Right.
And okay, so against righties this year, you don't have a huge sample, but Justin Smoke 37% strikeouts, Keston Hiura 33. Yelich 30, Narvaez 29, Avisel Garcia at 24.6. Those are 5 guys right there. Braun's at 22%. Then you get to Sogard and Arcia and those guys, but you're not particularly worried about them anyway. Yeah. Double-digit strike. I wonder what the strikeout prop for Bauer is today. I'm actually going to look.
Yeah, that's interesting to look up. And what you were just saying, you rattled off some of those hitters. You also just simultaneously named all the best hitters in this line.
Exactly.
So we're taking the bat out of the hands of the best hitters. So there's just nobody that we're really worried about getting to here. Even those guys that don't strike out or don't wield a big bat. So again, just not sweating him.
Where are you sitting on this the matchup opposite Trevor Bauer, Brett Anderson, and the Cincy Bats here at Miller Park?
I wrote up the Reds today as a stack that I like in stack slants this afternoon. So that's the one where I kind of look through the stack tool and try and pick off one that is maybe trending under where it is. And it looks like the ownership kind of caught up to it since I wrote that up. They're trending right around where they should be, but they're the 3rd ranked stack on DK, 4th ranked on FanDuel. I really like the spot for the Reds bats. I think they can get to Anderson here. He doesn't do a lot that I'm worried about. He's had an okay start to his year. He's striking out 18.4% of hitters. Only walking 5.3, 3.89 xFIP over just 17 innings. But he's just basically washed. And if you look at some of the StatCast stuff, he's 22nd percentile in exit velo so far, 3rd percentile in hard hit rate, 28th in xWOBA, only 14th percentile in whiff, 24th in K rate. So just not striking guys out. He's a 16.2% strikeout for his career. Using his sinker 41% of the time, trying to keep the ball on the ground. Gets okay, swing and miss on his breaking stuff, but just not somebody who's going to generate a bunch of strikeouts here. The Reds can keep the ball in play against him here, so I like their chances. Getting decent home run marks. They've got a lot of righties they can throw at him. My dog is whining over here in the corner. I'm not sure why.
I thought it was that or like a train coming to a halt on the tracks. I wasn't sure which one it was.
I'm just on the wrong side of the tracks. Now, the poor guy's got some hot spots on him, and it's bugging him, so he's whining today.
My dog was outside. I shut the door, and I heard her making wild noises, jumping all over the place. Dogs are the greatest thing in the world, man.
Oh, my God, absolutely. Nothing like that unbridled love and just nothing to do with anything, just explosion of love when you walk in the door, regardless of how anything's going.
It might upset people, but my buddy always said, and don't worry, it's a joke. If you lock your wife in the car, in the trunk and let her out, she hates you forever. You lock your dog in the trunk, he's licking your face when you open the door.
That's great.
I don't recommend anybody tries that.
Don't try it at home.
Yeah, they're like, oh, Luffy, I tried it out. You were so right. I'm divorced, but my dog loves me more now than ever. What do you think Bauer's K prop is? I looked it up on DraftKings.
10.5.
7.5.
7.5. That's it.
Now it's minus 150, but so the yes is minus 150, so there's some juice on it, but I think I'd still he feels like a mortal now he's going to have 2 strikeouts, right? But
that kind of cool.
It feels like a spot where Trevor Bauer should easily eclipse 8 strikeouts.
I would think so. I definitely like that.
Yeah,
10.5 obviously was wildly high. But 7.5. I could easily see him doing that in just the first few innings, to be honest. Against
yeah. I'd say if it was minus 150. So if it was even money, you'd probably be looking at 9.5, 8, probably 9.5, really. So I don't know. I hate taking minus 150 on something like that, though. So it's tough. Maybe you find it on a book where it's like minus 115 on 8.5 strikeouts. I'd be on board with that for sure. So look around. Kansas City, St. Louis. Jack Flaherty, baby, at home. Not that really matters against Kansas City. Like we said earlier, 3.5 run implied total for the Kansas City Royals. What are you thinking on Jack Flaherty today? Last start, his first in almost a month, about 3.5 weeks since his original start back on the 24th of July. He went 1 2/3 innings, only threw 41 pitches here. So how worried are we that he's on a real tight, short leash?
That's like my only big concern here. That's otherwise I'd be, really excited to roster Jack Flaherty. I get a good projection on him because I left the innings alone because I wanted to have a strong projection and try and get a little bit over the field on him because I do like the pitcher. I do think even say we see 65, 70 pitches from him, I think he could put up a decent strikeout game. It's too much to pay for that game on FanDuel at $10K. I don't love it at 93 on DraftKings, but maybe we can get away with it. If he's seeing more, if he's seeing, upwards of 80 pitches, then I like it. I think we can get into a very good start there. So it really all comes down to how much leash this guy has. And I just haven't seen anything to really let me know. But in a vacuum, he's a dynamite pitcher, approaching 30% strikeout rate for his career, walks around 8.3, keeps the ball in the yard pretty well, slightly more power to lefties, but nothing to worry about. Tremendous ability to limit the hard hit so far. Great whiff rate. Again, only very limited sample size, but that's who he is. So I like the pitcher. I'm just very concerned.
Yeah, Jake mentioned this morning that last year he had that massive strikeout split, 35% against righties, 25% against lefties. And it was looking like we were going to get 5 righties in this Royals lineup today, only 4. But the truth is, Dozier and Merrifield, Jorge Soler, basically 3 of their best hitters. Mondesi struggled. He's a switch bat. Nicky Lopez, you're not worried about. Valoria batting 9th. Maikel Franco's a righty. Alex Gordon being another one who hasn't fared all that well, 2,200 on DraftKings specifically. So, I am always on board with more righties against Jack Flaherty, but these lefties don't concern me all that much. It really, Terry, just comes down to, can he throw as many pitches as we need him to? What do you think he throws today? I'd say he has a pretty smooth outing, doesn't get into too much trouble. I know I'm putting you on the spot. It doesn't have to be perfect.
Yeah, I would say 75 is the ceiling I would expect.
Okay. So it really, really curtails his upside a lot.
Yeah.
Okay.
And look, that's not based on much outside of just they've had to restart their season 3 times now. They've had all these off days. They've had just a weird schedule. So prized arm like this, they're like 2 weeks off Major League's pace of just games played even. I just don't think they're going to screw around very much with this arm. I don't think they need to. So, yeah, I'm concerned. It's tough. It's a tough ask.
I'm with you. Man, we've had a lot of questions about Brad Keller. Even on this show in the morning, we had him too. Brad Keller will really piss you off. I'm telling you, whether you stack against him or you roster him, it's just last year he started the season on an absolute heater from a run prevention standpoint because he just somehow does an incredible job of limiting, preventing home runs. It's crazy, but he's not going to get a lot of strikeouts. So like last year, 0.82 home runs per 9. I remember in 2018, it was even more insane. He started 20 games through 140 innings, 0.45 home runs per 9 with a strikeout rate of 16%. So everything is put in play and somehow nothing ever leaves play. This year, he has not allowed a single home run in 17 innings. His K rate's actually up at 20. I think his K rate's at 22.7%, which is a little bit interesting. Swinging strike rate at 10.8%. So Brad Keller, it's still not prolific, but is there anything to the increased strikeout rate, or is this just something we're going to see come back down to earth?
I think it's something we're going to see come back down to earth. I was poking around with it, and I didn't see anything, if memory serves, the last time I checked, with where he's mixing up his pitch mix differently, presenting a different kind of arsenal. So I think it's just a product of happenstance so far. Only 17 innings, so I mean, we're only talking about a couple strikeouts that make that difference. So I think we see that normalized back to his 16, 17% kind of a rate. He's 17.2 for the career. 9.4 walks for his career. I think we see that normalized too. He's at 12.1 right now. So those two things will probably come back in. But you really told the story of it. I mean, he keeps the ball in the yard. He's a 0.61 home run per nine for his career. So, I mean, the guy is just very, very good at limiting home runs. He's getting 50% ground ball, which is what he really relies on. Get the ball on the ground and get those outs. You said it. Everybody puts the ball in play against him, but he relies on his defense, relies on the ability to get the grounder. He's sitting 70th percentile in exit velo, 62nd in hard hit, 48th percentile in xwOBA, only 87th percentile in barrels allowed. So he's avoiding the meat of the bat. He's inducing some soft contact. He's a pitcher I like. I'm gonna end up paying for him. I don't love the price tag at all on FanDuel at 8,900. It's too high. I like him better when he's a discounted pitcher, but there's not a ton of great differentiation points for arms here, and I think he might be one. I'm not too worried about this Cardinals offense against him. There's not a ton in here that really frightens me. They get Paul DeJong back, another power bat in the middle, but he strikes out a little bit just coming back. I'm not sweating that too much. I definitely like Keller at 67 on DraftKings, where I think is really the story.
Yeah, you might have to take some shots. It's not the craziest idea at all. And ownership weighing in right now at what is he?
Looks like he's about
6%.
Yeah, 6%, about half of what his probability of being one of the top two is.
Interesting. Yeah. Hey, you might just have to roll with it until he comes back down to earth. If he does, we'll find out. But yeah, it's a pretty solid price on a night where you don't have a lot of discounted pitchers. Let's talk about the Angels, Houston Astros. Framber Valdez, Patrick Sandoval. Any interest in either of these guys tonight?
No, not really on the arms. I wrote up the Astros last night. I think they're an explosively good stack today. Definitely want to roll some of them out against Sandoval. Not as excited to roll Angels bats against Framber, but I'm not really looking to throw that much Framber out there. I'm getting low projections on both of these guys in this matchup. And Framber, particularly on FanDuel, is 9K, which for me is basically a don't touch in this spot. I just don't see getting to that. I don't see how they really justify that price tag on him. 7,600 on DK. I think you can get to it for sure. I think you can roll him out with some shares of SP2. He's trending around the right ownership for his probability of being one of the top two over on DK. But I think he's usable there. Sandoval, maybe just like a little 2% usage just to put some differentiation into things, but not a pitcher I trust by any means.
No, not at all. Valdez has been very good. There's no denying that. The numbers have looked pretty solid. He's pitching very deep into games. Just went 7 2/3 with one earned against the Rockies at Coors Field. So definitely have some respect for him. You mentioned that price tag on FanDuel. Right now it's 76 on DraftKings. Just to circle back here for a second, do you think that price point is decent enough at that cost? Like I said, 7,600. I think you have to sort by. Yeah, he's in as a relief pitcher on DraftKings. His ownership 11.5%. So he's actually coming in as the 5th highest owned pitcher right now on DraftKings.
Yeah, and just sorting by, I've got Alex's projections in here. He looks like he's like only the 9th ranked just in terms of raw projection over there.
Right.
Some of them are, kind of mashed together in the middle with a Keller and a Merrill Kelly, but Keller's higher ranked for less money. I kind of like that. And then you can pay up to or you can move up to a Luzardo at 7,400 is decently higher projected. We're eating a lot of ownership if we make that pivot, obviously, but definitely buying into a better spot, I think.
Talk to me about Astros bats today. Ownership 7%, top stack probabilities at 8%. Their value here is one of the things that's probably holding them back. Top value, it's in the bottom 5 against Sandoval. Right now, their implied total sits at 5.3 against this Angels team at Minute Maid. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I really like the Astros here. I mentioned just a second ago that I wrote them up. You're right. They're pricey, so the value isn't there, but that's probably what's keeping more people off of this spot, I think, in general. Sandoval, not a good pitcher overall. He gives up some home runs, only 59 innings, so it's a little bit unfair to cite, but I'll cite it anyway. 5 home runs to lefties in his 59 innings, 6 to righties out of his 11 home runs, and that's despite facing a lot more righties. So gives up some same-handed power. We know there's a ton of good righty bats in this lineup, but we also have some good lefty bats in here. So like a Kyle Tucker cleaning up for this team getting good numbers, lefty-lefty. Really like that spot. Only around 10% ownership on DK, under 10% on FanDuel. So I really like the spot for Tucker there. Not too expensive either. 3,800 on DK, 3,100 on FanDuel. I think he could do some damage cleaning up there in a spot where people might skip him just based on a lefty-lefty matchup that won't really affect him. You've got the righties up top, Springer, Altuve, Correa to build with. Yuli Gurriel, perennially underrated righty in the middle of this with a good amount of power. So I really like the top 5, 6 there with Brantley hitting 6th. You get down to Reddick, he loses a little bit, and the split, but doesn't really strike out that much. Martin Maldonado is somebody that people are not necessarily rolling out too much because he costs $4,200, but could be a good way to differentiate your mandatory catcher over on DK. So I think there are very good things we can do with these Astros bats tonight. I love the spot. I
think you're right. And ownership way lower than you would expect that to be. But pricing comes into the picture. There's a couple. Springer, Altuve, Gurriel are pricey, but you just kind of rattled off a bunch of other ones too. Tucker batting cleanup here. There's a bunch of really good prices. So I don't know. I guess I'm a little bit surprised that they're not as high owned as you would think, given that there's probably 3 or 4 lesser expensive bats that you can mix in with these 5K guys really easily to balance out that salary on this stack.
Yeah, for sure. And that's something I was talking about a little bit last night with the early bird, as far as using the stack tool and the individual player ownership and kind of putting those together when you look at those. Because sometimes we do see a few guys just really elevate that overall team ownership, where you can pick off 3 or 4 different guys in there that are just as good or right there with their teammates that aren't getting owned nearly as well, and get to one of the top stacks that way while differentiating things and not really have to sweat the ownership. So it's important to take the full spectrum into account when you're looking at this stuff, for sure.
All right, you ready to close this out, and then we'll start taking some questions?
Sounds good.
You guys start peppering us with some questions in chat. I'll pay attention to those while Terry hits on this final game between the Colorado Rockies, the Arizona Diamondbacks. 5.6 run implied total for the Diamondbacks, 4.5 for the Rockies. If you look across this slate, I believe the highest run total is going to be the Diamondbacks at 5.6. That is also one of the reasons why they're getting an inordinate amount of ownership right now. 19% aggregate ownership on DraftKings with a top stack probability around 11.4%. But hey, people like them, Terry. The lineup is in, and one of the big things here is high run total, high ownership, but some of these guys are cheap. Cole Calhoun, sub 4K. David Peralta in the cleanup spot against Ryan Castellani at 3,400. Christian Walker batting 5th at 38. There are some really discounted bats with the highest run total of the night. People are going to pounce on that because the value is there. Is this the spot we should be flocking towards, knowing that a lot of people are getting to it?
So I like the spot, but the last part of what you said there is critical, right? It's going to be so popular that I think maybe we shave some of that ownership off, go a little bit under the public, get to some of them anyway. Don't leave them out. I'm not, advocating to fade them entirely here, but maybe work in some more Astros than the public is. Try and, different and offset some of that ownership that way. Take some of these snake shares and put them on different teams that are going a little bit ignored. We've got some other quality here. So I really do like the spot. I don't think Castellani is a very good pitcher. I'm killer home run marks, all over 10 for the top 5 guys in the lineup for the top 6 guys for the Diamondbacks in my home run model. Alex likes them in the projections. They rank very well, like you said, in the top stacks tool. But yeah, on both sites, they're trending well over what their probability of being the top team is, while we've got a Houston going under, a Cincinnati going right around but lower, a Minnesota going under, an Angels going under. So there's a lot of different spots that we can get to that I think we can exploit that, where let everybody get to the the Diamondbacks here and maybe exploit that by going to different spots. Would not roster any Castellani.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on Merrill Kelly before we close it out with the Rockies?
So I was expecting to like him a bit more than I ended up. Rockies on the road, all that, but not getting the greatest projection on him. The price is basically the same on both sites. There are other guys, I think, at that tier that we pretty much get to on both of these sites as far as pitching goes. I'm just clicking over to see where Alex has them. Yeah, like middle of the top stacks tool, definitely not drawing the ownership in conjunction with his chances of being the top option on FanDuel, top 2 on DraftKings. So that's got more appeal than my personal projection is showing me. So I might flip that over, use Alex's projection and try and get to more Merrill Kelly just based on that. I think there's a paucity of ownership there that we can take advantage of, even though it's not my favorite spot. Rockies are a lineup I do like. They're dynamic when Raimel Tapia hits up top, a little lefty bat that's sneaky good with some speed. And then you've got the obvious names, the Stories, Blackmans, Arenados, Murphys, and McMahons of the world there. So it's a good lineup, but they do struggle a little bit on the road away from Coors. So I think we can roll out some Kelly here with that ownership advantage. And that's a surprise to me.
All right. Do you have interest in Rocky bats, or is it just maybe a little bit of Kelly here?
Given that he's not going to be as owned as I thought he might be, I think I would not get to as much Rockies bats as I would have thought of it originally. I'll probably have some. They're a stack, like I said. I do think I get to a fair amount. On FanDuel, you've also got some just tremendous savings. 2,300 for Tapia up top, 26 for Murphy, 29 for McMahon, 23 for Kemp. So they're just good building blocks in this lineup. The popular players are going fairly well owned on FanDuel, not as much on DK. So I think we can build a little bit with the Rockies, but they're not my favorite stack. They're not one I'd be looking to go nuts with here by any means. About the middle of the stacks tool on both sides, slightly under-owned on DK. So I like it a little bit more on DK maybe.
7 up, Terry, 7 down. Time to take some questions. Guys, hit that thumbs up. It helps us immensely. YouTube algorithm, it favors the bigger channels, the ones that, get them paid more. But by hitting that thumbs up, subscribing, and the notification bell, it is gratefully impactful for us so we can get more views on on this channel, but also continue to do free content here at Awesemo.com. All right, let's see what we got. In a single entry, would you fade Arizona, Colorado, and go with the Houston or Cincy stack instead? That's a great question, Terry. And I think we kind of both answered that throughout the show. But if you want to repeat kind of where we stand on that. So it was, would you fade Arizona, Colorado? And by the way, Jeremiah, mind you, this is in Arizona, not in Colorado. So just, don't feel like you have to load up on a Coors game, although Arizona is the highest owned team. And would you go with a Houston or Cincy stack instead in a single entry?
I think I would, specifically in a single entry. I think you gain a lot by jumping off of that Arizona ownership and hop over to a team like Houston that's under-owned, just as good, in a vacuum, probably a better lineup, good matchup, and not as many people going to them. I think that's an easy pivot that you can make and differentiate yourself nicely in a single entry. You're getting around half the team ownership, so you don't even have to go nuts trying to build in guys that are super duper low owned in that spot. You can, work with some of the more popular guys and just rely on the fact that you're getting to a lower owned stack. You're paying up a little bit to do it. They're around half the value. But I think with some of the value pitchers that we talked about, some of the other stacks that are on the board as far as value goes, I think we can do that comfortably.
Okay. Let's see here. Willie Castro or Jack Mayfield for shortstop on DraftKings?
I'll let you take that one. I don't have that DK slate in front of me.
Yeah.
You got a preference there? Let me see if I can pull them up.
Yeah, I can pull it up again. So Castro is third base shortstop eligible. He's $3,000. Who was the other guy he had? Mayfield. So, okay. Willie Castro, Troy against Mills or Mayfield. I'd say I think I'd go with the $2,900 Mayfield. I just think you're going to see more opportunities with runners on the base paths, more run scoring opportunities. Understandably, a guy in the 9 hole isn't all that enticing. So, you can weigh that against it. But Willie Castro is also batting in the 9 spot. So give me the one for $100 less expensive that's on a much better team with a run total that's about 0.7 higher on the day.
There you go.
All right. How is the Brewers bullpen this year when Anderson gets rocked? Are we liking Cincinnati lefties in the stack? Terry, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we can roll out some of these guys. I mean, Winker loses a lot of his quality in a lefty-lefty, but if we get to a bullpen and you see some of these arms come out of there, he might see a couple righties, might get 2 plate appearances against a righty, and then you never know. He's not the greatest spot in the world with the righty quality that they're rolling out there, and you're trying to pick off some of that early explosion. I don't love the idea of just, hey, maybe we can get to him. Maybe we'll see 2 plate appearances. You're really limiting your opportunity for upside with that, but I wouldn't leave him out of like all of my red stacks just because they're starting a lefty here.
For sure. Shit, I would have ignored that question if I saw you asked it 17 times. Not this last one, but the Willie Castro one. 15 times. Easy, dude. I get to all of them. Luzardo or Valdez for SP2? Obviously, this is a DraftKings or a two-pitcher site question. It's definitely it's Luzardo for you, right?
Yeah, I mean, taking everything out of it as far as ownership and everything goes, it's definitely Luzardo, but you're swallowing a lot of ownership that way.
How do I feel about the Brett Brown firing? I'm ecstatic. Now, I think he's a great human. I can't imagine many people in life don't like the guy personally. He's just a shitty coach. The front office sucks too. So I don't absolve them of everything, but I don't think it's a spot where Brett Brown needs to be there next year. But Sean Michael, good question. I'm happy somebody asked. Miguel Cabrera for a dong today. Somebody says, David, great podcast, fellas. Thank you. Always, man. Always. Let's see. Casey Mize. Oh, here's a really good one. Let's say, I'm assuming Andrew's talking tournaments. Casey Mize or Brad Keller? I'm assuming you're going Keller here, particularly with how much the Cubs ownership it sounds like you're going to have.
Yeah, I think that would definitely be Keller.
Okay. God, the strikeout upside is sexy with Casey Mize, man. But I understand where we're coming from here with Brad Keller.
Yeah, it really is. And in something like that, what I like to do, honestly, is it's just a cheap, easy way to do it. If I have a kind of a tiebreaker decision like that, and I'm just looking for something to help me, Chicago's Alex's top-ranked stack today. Chicago, the Cubbies going against him. So that's going to help me make that decision. It'll help me get off of him a little bit more. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but that means the best player in the world was wrong about it too. So I can go down with that shit.
There it is. Kyriakos says, is 4 Astros too much? No, definitely not.
No.
Michael asked, Kenta Maeda in tournaments, question mark?
Yes, but ownership's fine on him. So yeah, I would roll Maeda in tournaments for sure.
All right. Lavi, do you play ball hockey or roller hockey? I play roller hockey, and I haven't played ice in a while, but played ice hockey my whole life. You get a little bit old. What's that?
Do you use a ball or do you use a?
Oh no, puck. No. We're talking like legit sport court, full rank. It's competitive for sure.
Okay. All right.
Oh yeah, it's competitive.
Yeah,
no,
it's a puck.
puck.
Thing never worked for me. We used to use a little roll of electrical tape and get it all weighed down on the street.
Oh yeah, there it is. People used to do that all the time. Yeah. We the thing with ice hockey now is when you're in men's league, the games are at like 10 o'clock on a Wednesday, and it's just not worth it. You know?
Yeah.
I can get 7 o'clock games of roller hockey, hang out with the buddies. You know, it's a good time. Brantley or Reddick, Terry?
Who was that? Brantley or Reddick?
Brantley or Reddick?
Brantley.
Butthole Jenkins, Trevor Bauer, best pitcher, question mark. For me, he is. I think, particularly on DraftKings at 10-2, that's a price point I have a very tough time getting away from.
Yeah, for me, that's Trevor Bauer, best pitcher, exclamation point.
There you go. Schwarber or Tucker? That's a good question.
Schwarber.
An easy answer.
I think he was one of my higher home run marks on the board overall for me today, if I'm remembering the home run model accurately.
All right. Schwarber one-off or Tucker part of a stack. Okay, that's a little bit different. Schwarber one-off or Tucker part of a stack. So I'm assuming he's got the Houston stack, and he's deciding on taking Tucker out to replace him with a one-off of Schwarber or stacking with Houston.
I would be curious just what other bats we're connecting to. Are we talking about like right next to him in the lineup, tightly correlated bats, or is it like he's hitting fourth and then I guess he's kind of in the middle. But yeah, I think I would probably stick with the stack rather than pull out the one-off. You're just asking for a different set of circumstances by dropping that one-off in there.
Would you run Lynn and Bauer together on tournaments and on DraftKings? Fine with that, but I think both of us also acknowledge that Lynn's ownership is extraordinarily high today.
Yeah. What you might gain in doing that, if you have two stacks that you like that can make that work, is the offset of just those two together. I don't think many people are going to do that. Right.
Yeah, that's going to be difficult. I wonder, are there any cheap enough stacks that actually you can just, and by the way, you can justify anything. I've watched people win tournaments, $100,000. So have you, with Miami Marlins stacks against like a Noah Syndergaard. You know, it happens. It does. But there's also the justification of whether or not you're just getting super lucky or it's actually a good move. Are there any stacks out there? We could pull up the top stack tool. Any cheap stacks that make for good value outside? Like Chicago has a good value rating. Arizona pretty decent. Detroit, but they're owned. You ever notice all the teams that are top value are always going to be the highest owned. It's not always the teams with the highest top stack probability.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. People like to lean into that, the salary end of it more so than the projections even. It's interesting that way. And I think we get a little bit of that, naturally just from hand builders and stuff like that get scooped up. But yeah, that seems to be the case. Maybe just looking down the value on DK, one that you didn't mention, Cincinnati. We've touched on them a few times. They're around appropriate ownership, but one of the better value teams. So maybe because they're going to be owned about half of what like the Cubbies are. That might be a way to go. KC, I would throw out there just as a vet, but it's only value. They're the bottom ranked team. So you're not getting anything there really. So
when did Alex put the bar graph at the bottom of the top stack tool? That's pretty sweet. Did you see that little visual down there? I've never seen that.
I did. I've actually, right now, I've got it copy pasted over to my spreadsheet, so I'm not seeing what you're seeing, but I didn't know there was a bar graph there. That's awesome.
He set it up where it's like top stacks in blue and ownership share in red. So you don't have to look at the individual numbers. You can see if ownership's way higher than top stack probability just by looking at the little chart. Pretty cool. I had no idea that was there.
That's great. I got to scroll down more often.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. It's got to be new, unless I'm just blind. But yeah, that's pretty cool. Okay, nice. And it's ranking it by owner or by top stack probability. But yeah, that's a cool little visual there. It's probably easier for some people to look at as well. All right, a couple more here. We got about 2 minutes to go. Let's say Moustakas revenge narrative. I'm not a revenge guy. Here's the thing, Andrew. I don't believe your hand-eye coordination improves because you're pissed off. As a matter of fact, it probably gets worse. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. The worst thing I think you can try and do is try to hit a baseball. Try to hit a home run.
Exactly right. Now in basketball, if you're Kobe Bryant or you're LeBron James and you're a ball dominant player and going to have every opportunity and you can get to the rim at will, that's a little bit of a different story because you can actually control how much you want to do. In baseball, no. You see pitchers with this whole revenge narrative. They go out, they're throwing 2 miles per hour quicker, and they're nowhere near their spots. They're nowhere near the plate. So no, not a revenge narrative guy, particularly with baseball.
Ignore pretty much every narrative in baseball. Baseball's a numbers game, and it's just not. As soon as the ball leaves the pitcher's hand, he can't do anything about what else happens.
Exactly, so unless it's bobblehead night.
Yeah, of course. That's the only one we got to lean into.
Yeah, they crush on bobblehead night. I guess that's it, man. Hour and 5 minutes in the books. Any final thoughts for everybody before we head out on this 7-gamer, Terry?
No, I'm going to dig into see what I put into my crunch here because I just uploaded it while we were talking, and I'm not entirely sure what's in there, so I hope it went the way I wanted to, and I'm going to hop on the early bird after that. So everybody catch the early bird and hit our fantasy football rankings, by the way. Have you checked those? I know you've checked those out. We've been talking about that here and there, but like the advantage with our fantasy football rankings is so huge over what other people in the group think and everything out there are doing.
Yep.
I'm so looking forward to my drafts. I was looking around and poking in it last night.
It's awesome, man. Totally data-driven. Alex said Jake D is the one that did the bar graph. That's awesome. Yeah, completely data-driven. Awesome, like visually, super aesthetically appealing. So you can look at pull up the player pages and get a good idea of what you're dealing with. But also, Alex Baker, applying the knowledge of DFS to seasonal fantasy, ignoring the groupthink, and we're all going to win a lot of money playing best ball and season long. And if you haven't done so yet, it's $29.95 for the entire package. Everything we have to offer. You get a $35 credit to FFPC, Fantasy Football Players Championship, where they've got monster tournaments and a ton of cash prizes. Legitimate site. You'll like it there. So it literally pays for itself. As a matter of fact, it pays you $6 to get our fantasy football packages. $29.95, while it pays you $5.05. So there's no reason not to do that. $35 in free credits. Boom. Get those lineups in and use all of our information with your free $35 in credits. Thank you for bringing that up, Terry. It's been fun, man.
Yeah, it's a good one. Flew by.
It did. Always does. We'll do this again soon. Terry and I will be back with you next Monday on Live Before Lock. But until then, like he said, early bird coming up to close out the night, or you can listen bright and early with your cup of coffee. Either or, they both work for us. Tomorrow, we've got the NBA strategy show, MLB strategy show, PGA strategy show, Live Before Lock for NBA, MLB, and so much more. Stay here at youtube.com/Awesemo and check us out at awesemo.com. We'll see you back soon.